And hello, everybody. Before I get started, those of you who are in transition right now, I'm just curious if you could put in the chat, how many times have you been out of work or looking for your next opportunity, beyond just, getting out of college and starting out your first role as your career has moved on? How often has that happened to you? If you could put in, thank you, Tracy. You could put in number one, two, whatever it might be. First time. Okay. Second time, five times. Tom, you might be the winner. Second time, first, three. Okay. There's a good range
What
here.
what what prize does Tom win for that?
He gets, I don't know. We'll have to work on that. We'll see. But uh, I think it shows actually, Tom, it's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, you're getting lots of experiences and growing, I'm sure, with each role. Okay, so we've got a bit of a range here. And the reason why I ask that is because it's sometimes being out of work, it can be a bit jolting, as I'm sure you all know. And you may ask yourself, how did I get here? Maybe a quick bonus. Anybody want to say what song is that quote? You may ask yourself, how did I get here? Anybody want
Talking
to give that?
Heads. Talking
Thank you.
Heads.
Thank you very much. You got, I knew it, Larry. Larry, somehow sometimes I want to hear about your past. You seem to know a lot of these kind of things. I'm sure it's an interesting one. But
We'll talk.
anyway, the point of it is it can be jarring and you wonder, my gosh, my career was going so well. What happened? And it can be called different things. Sometimes people will take time off to care for family. Sometimes you're just part of a layoff, the wrong place, the wrong time. Sometimes you're terminated, you're furloughed. For me, as John mentioned, I was 25 years at Johnson and Johnson. I was 52 years old. I had two kids in college and one in high school. Excuse me, and came across a new general manager at the operating company I was at. And in our first meeting, he told me that he'd led two different training and development teams in his career, and I would never live up to his expectation. It was a very uncomfortable situation, to say the least. And I'm one of those people, by the way, who, when I'm driving home, I say, "Oh, I should have said this, I could have said that." But I was on it for this one. I said, "Well, you know what, Eric? If you look at my 24 years of performance reviews, I think you'll see that I've always met and exceeded expectations. So I'm looking forward to exceed yours." Drop the mic and walk out, right? I got that. I nailed that one. But he wasn't impressed at all. And he said, no, I would not live up to his expectation. Over the next several months, he made my life pretty miserable till I found myself driving home. I could remember the moment where I stopped at a gas station to fill up a car, and I was standing there thinking, what just happened? How did this happen? My career was going so well. Everything was going great. I could see retirement down the road, and it's gone. And it was, the word I used to describe it is devastating. I really found it rocked my world. I put it on par with the five stages of grief. I've unfortunately lost my parents, and those were clearly two of the worst times of my life, but this one was not far behind. And so I understand what you might be going through, especially if this is your first time through. But I know for me, I couldn't do anything until I got my head on straight, until I reminded myself who I was and what I had to offer. And it really comes down to this. I recognized that I was defining myself as a J&J employee. I had my Johnson Johnson American Express card. I had all the swag they give me. When I told people I worked for J&J, everybody knew it. So that's who I was. And then it was taken away from me. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I like to share this with other people because you may be going through it. I needed help to get through that. I sought out professional help. I saw a therapist and she was great. She helped me through it. And once I had my head back on straight, once I reminded myself of the value that I bring, that I could bring and did bring to my former company, would bring to future, I regained my confidence. I regained that feeling that, yeah, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to get this done. And I did land three new jobs while I was still in my 50s. And my last one was with Bristol Myers Squibb when I realized I was done with corporate America. And I think corporate America was done with me as well. But that's fine because I found my way. And I'm going to share with you today how I did that. And I'm a kind of person, I think I'm a kind of coach. I like to be practical. I like to talk in terms of the things that anybody can do. I get frustrated sometimes when people give these big academic presentations and they say, "I did it, you can do it too." Well, yeah, there's truth in that, but the fact of the matter is you have to find it within yourself. And whatever way that is, it's probably somewhat unique to you. So as you go through your job search, listen to different people, get ideas from people, but figure out what works best for you. And don't let anybody ever tell you, you have to do it this way. You can't do it that way. Don't say this, but you can say that. There are certainly levels of that, but you've got to feel good and comfortable and confident with your own approach. And I'm going to talk to you about trust because even though J&J ended poorly for me, I really still like the company. And I think a lot of the reason why Johnson & Johnson is successful has to do with the trust they've built with their different stakeholders. And this here is it's called Our Credo. It's the Johnson & Johnson Credo. It's a one-page, four-paragraph document that outlines the relationship J&J wants to have with their key stakeholders. The first paragraph is about the relationship with the healthcare workers and the patients they serve, giving them safe and effective products. The second paragraph's about the responsibility to the employees, giving them a fair wage and a safe place to work. The third paragraph's about the responsibility to the communities that we serve, meaning giving back to the communities, being good stewards of the environment. And then the last paragraph's about the responsibility to stockholders, giving them a fair return on their investment. And the reason why this is an important document is because they actually use it. First of all, it was written by General Robert Wood Johnson. At the time, he was the only stockholder and he put himself last. But he knew if he developed those good, powerful relationships with those other stakeholders, he would be successful and he would get a return on his investment. For the last 90 years, by the way, J&J has paid quarterly dividends to stockholders. But it's this trust, building trust, and J&J has demonstrated it in a number of ways. It's not a perfect company. I know there are questions out there, but there are a lot of things very quickly. The Tylenol scare back in '82, where somebody tampered with Tylenol and people died. They took the acetaminophen out of the Tylenol capsules, replaced it with cyanide, and unsuspecting people took it and they died. 6 people died. And J&J was faced with a dilemma. We have this great relationship with people. We're the mother and baby company. We've developed trust over all these years. And here, this tragedy is threatening not only the Tylenol brand, but all of J&J, because if you can't trust a medical company, you're not going to use their products. So what J&J did was, instead of trying to convince people that it was safe, that everything was okay, they pulled Tylenol from the shelves at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars. And when they put it back on the shelf a few months later with the first child-resistant bottle, those caps that you get, why do they do this? This is why. It's for our safety. Within a couple months, Tylenol became the #1 over-the-counter pain reliever again. And the reason is because J&J never lost the trust that they had built with their consumers, with their customers. And as a job seeker, your job from the phone screen on is to demonstrate, to build trust with the people you're interviewing with or with the people you're having networking conversations with. And it's got to be done quickly in a lot of cases, right? And a phone screen's 30 minutes, maybe. Interviews are an hour typically. So how you present yourself, how you present your stories of that are your interview answers, that's how you build trust. And when you build trust, you'll be successful, because trust is the foundation of great relationships, and great relationships are the key to success. And I believe so strongly in that I built what's called the trust success model. And you can't really have a model without having an acronym, right? So trust is my acronym. And it stands for, as you see, transparency, results, understanding, simplicity, and teams. And I'm going to walk through each one of these, and I'm going to show you how each aspect of the trust model can help you with your job search and be successful in that job search. And I'll go through each one, and I'll take a break after each one. So if you have a question, you want to put it in the chat, I will stop. And John, if you wouldn't mind monitoring the chat, I don't see it on my screen at this time. Yes. If there are any questions, I'll give a chance at that point. So when you talk about transparency, really what I'm talking about is being transparent with yourself, being honest with yourself, taking inventory of your experiences, What are the past jobs that you've had that you've really enjoyed? What are the jobs you haven't liked? What are the aspects within those jobs, the projects you did, the skills you used, the environment you were working in? What are those things that you really liked? What is it that if you could put yourself in a perfect situation, what would that look like? And then you also want to think about what's the kind of culture I want to work in. Do I also want to work in an office? Do I want to be remote or hybrid? And then what's the importance of each of these things? Because sometimes you can't have it all, so you have to make that call. But when you do that, when you think about the skills, the projects, the jobs you've had, it'll start giving you an idea of maybe what direction you want to take your career. It starts reminding you of who you are also and helps you to start building your confidence. And when I work with my clients, I like to start early on. Tell me about some of your successes you've had throughout your career. And there are a number of reasons why you want to do this. First one is, and you could say it's to rebuild the trust you have in yourself, is to remind yourself of the great things you've done in the past. To remind yourself that you have contributed. You wouldn't have had the career you had or the time you had at any particular job if you weren't doing the job well. So when you start getting those interview stories down early, it helps you rebuild your confidence and remind you who you are. It also will remind you that this being out of work for you, it's just a blip on your career radar screen. In the scheme of things, in your 25, 30, 40-year career, this is going to represent a very small amount. I understand at this time, it could be a little painful, it could be difficult. I get that. In the big picture, you'll be able to look back and see, you know what, that was a lousy time, but I survived it and I'm moving on, and I'm probably better off now than I was then. So after you take your inventory, some of the things actually I should say you want to think about in today's world, it's a little different. I know some of you might be mid to late career and maybe haven't looked for a job for a long time. Well, things are different in a number of different areas. And one of the areas is what is it that hiring managers are looking for today? Before COVID, it was a different world, right? You had to be in the office, you could communicate that way. Technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. Certainly with AI, everything's AI now. You got to have AI or at least some knowledge of AI. So, how do you present yourself to build that trust with the interviewer that you have the skills and the experiences they need to fill the role they're looking to fill? And certainly demonstrating your technical ability is important. And it doesn't mean you need to be a software engineer or a computer programmer of any kind. It just means you need to be comfortable with technology. A lot of times you can demonstrate it just by being on the video, how you handle yourself on a video. It could be when you tell your interview answers, your stories, that you reference using some kind of technology, just to show them that you're comfortable with it, that you use it, and it's not an intimidation to you. Like I say, especially mid to late career people need to be aware of this. Because I know there's discrimination out there. There's age discrimination, race discrimination, gender discrimination. But there are also, I think, a majority of people are just looking for the best people to fill the roles. And when someone says, oh, I was discriminated for age, I don't think it's because you're 50, 60, or 70 years old. I think it's because you didn't demonstrate that you're up to speed on things. You don't have a comfort level with technology. You haven't stayed up to date with the marketplace or have that passion or energy that is needed to be successful in a particular role. So you have to be able to communicate that when they don't ask you directly or when you don't have an answer directly. But with all these things, talking about technology you've used, talking about how you've collaborated with people maybe who are not in your office, who are not in the same location as you, because in the post-COVID world, if you're hybrid or remote, you're going to have to do that. So how do you show your communication skills, your collaboration skills? What kind of stories can you tell about where you took initiative? As a hiring manager, if I'm hiring a remote worker, I don't have to worry about that. Oh, geez, I got to tell them what to do all the time. They don't make their own decisions. I wish you would just go with it. You have to be able, you want to demonstrate that if you hire me, you don't have to worry about me. I'm going to get the job done and I'm going to always look for ways to do better and produce more. I think there are a number of other things here. I'm not going to touch on each one, but hopefully you get the concept that one way to build trust with your interviewer is by giving them the information that they need that will help them see that you are the person that can help them by filling this role, helping them save money, save time, whatever it might be. And once you have that down of who you are, what your skills are, you want to be able to communicate that in a very succinct, clear way. And that's really what personal branding is all about. Personal branding is what makes you stand out from the crowd. It's what people think about when they hear your name. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have a personal brand, that's wrong. Everybody has a brand, whether you like it or not. It might not be the brand you want. So you want to find out what people do think about you. So you might ask colleagues or former colleagues or peers, what is it that you liked about working with me? What is it that I brought to the table that you felt was particularly valuable? And that's how you start to build your brand. And that could be the common theme then that you have in your resume, in your LinkedIn profile, in your networking conversations, in your interviewing. I mean, that's what marketing's about. It's about driving a consistent message over and over again. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the elevator pitch. I think it's somewhat unrealistic. First of all, I think some people think the elevator is the Empire State Building, so they kind of go on and on and on. Second of all, I just don't think it's natural. I mean, I can't imagine walking into an elevator, seeing the president of the company and saying, hello, my name's Ken, I'm a project manager, and I do blah, 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 blah. It's just not going to happen that way. But there was a book that I've read, and actually the author came and spoke to Beacon a couple years ago called The Art of Hello. And the author's name is Paula Calise, Calise. And she says that you really should be able to introduce yourself in a compelling, attention-grabbing, memorable way in 20 words or less. She introduced herself by saying, I'm Paula Calise, I'm an executive recruiter, and I fill hard-to-fill positions. That's how we introduced her when she spoke to Beacon. That's how she introduces herself in networking situations. In fact, she talks about she got a call from somebody from Europe, and the person said, is this Paula Calise? She said, yes. He said, I hear you fill hard to fill positions. So I want you all to think about what is it that people think about when they hear your name? What is it that you can attach as your strength, as your brand that other people would want, that other people could use as hiring you as an employee? So when you take that personal brand or that art of hello and then you combine it with a elevator speech, so to speak, here's what you might come up with. For me, I might say I help people improve their professional life. I think, or professional lives. I got to work on that. I'm sure that I think it should be plural. But anyway, and I hope people would say, really, how do you do that? And I say, well, I'm a career coach, executive coach, keynote speaker, and author, and I help people at all points of their career, whether they're in career transition or they're currently working, and I help them to realize their potential and to achieve more than they ever thought they could achieve. So if people look at me and say, hey, that's the guy who helps people improve their professional life, then I'd feel pretty good about that. Another example, I'm a project manager who's known for delivering projects on time and under budget. Well, that to me sounds kind of interesting. How do you do that? Well, my colleagues have told me they appreciate that I look to understand what the desired outcome is, and I'm relentless in getting it done. I'm very focused on the details, and I'm disciplined in my approach, but I'm also flexible, and the results typically meet or exceed expectations. And then one last example might be someone who has been out of the workforce for a while, and they may say, I'm a master planner and organizer who successfully run a household of 3 children and 1 spouse. And my fellow stay-at-home parents, they tell me they really like the way I'm able to get things done by engaging everybody, making things challenging and fun. And these are a lot of the same skills I used when I was a product manager at blah, blah, blah. So the point is, you want to have an opening statement that's an attention grabber, that's compelling, that's memorable. And if nothing else, if all someone remembered about me is that I help people improve their professional life, that would be great. And it's also the start to the answer to the question, tell me about yourself in an interview. So that's it about transparency, taking inventory of yourself and figuring out what direction do you want to take your career, whether it's back to doing what you were doing or whether you're looking for a career change. And with that, John, I'll ask you real quick, are there any questions?
Not so far, but I just wanted to make an observation. I really like that both in the book and what you said now, you emphasized looking at what do you enjoy? Because one of the traps I have seen many times is that people get trapped by what they're good at. Hey, I'm really good at analyzing regulations. Well, but if that's not what I want to be doing, I shouldn't make that front and center part of my branding statement. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's something I bring to the table. Maybe it's an additional element that I might, use in certain situations, but I don't want a job where that's primary. So don't let
Mhm.
the things that you're good at trap you into saying, well, that's what I have to present.
That's a great point, John. I think sometimes we do feel like, oh, I've got to go back to do what I was doing also, and I didn't like what I was doing, but I got to go do that. And to your point, John, finding something better. It's the difference between looking at you being out of work as is something that's happened to you versus an opportunity. It actually can be a great opportunity for you to find a better position for yourself. Maybe it does involve a career pivot. For me, by the way, one of the things I did in taking inventory, I thought about the jobs I really liked. I loved being a sales manager. I loved, I think I was a good leader and motivating people. And I loved helping people improve their selling skills so they could be more successful in their roles. And then when I looked at that, I thought, well, what kind of jobs are associated with that? And one was, well, I could go and be a trainer. I could go maybe be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher, but for me personally, the compensation wasn't there. Or I could become a coach and really get the best of everything, be able to coach people on their leadership, motivate them, help them improve their lives. And that's what put me on the trajectory towards being a coach.
I also like what you said about the comfort with technology, because I think a lot of times, particularly those of us who are maybe later in our careers, we don't think of the message we're sending to someone. Like the person who in the course of networking or an interview says, "Yeah, I don't believe in social media." Well, I don't care if
Mhm.
you use social media to any great extent, but you've just revealed an attitude towards new technology.
Mhm.
So get comfortable with it. Or AI, it's stupid. I hate it. Well,
Mhm.
every job is going to involve AI to some degree. So don't bring those attitudes forward. Get
Mhm.
comfortable. You may not use some of it. That's fine, but get comfortable with it. So I don't see you as a dinosaur.
Mhm. Yep, you've got to be open to show that you're open to growth, open to continuous learning. Good.
So I don't
Good.
see any other questions in the chat box. So you're
Okay.
welcome to move on.
Thank you, John. Okay. So the results part of the trust success model, I'm going to focus on resumes here. And you might have heard that this first fact that a recruiter will look at your resume for 5 to 7 seconds. Now that doesn't mean they're reading your resume. I'm a project manager with 20 years experience who, 7 seconds is up, I'm done. What it means is that they're skimming your resume. And so you need to make it so that things pop out of the resume that grab their attention and make them want to spend more than 5 to 7 seconds. Make them want to read the resume enough that they're going to say, I want to call this person. I want to learn more about them. So it all starts with the summary up top. Is it compelling? Is it attention grabber? Should look a little bit backwards, but mostly here's what I bring to the table, Mr. or Ms. Hiring Manager, that you want. And when you do that, I'll tell you the way I write resumes with my clients is I'll do the summary. And then personally, I like to put in the top three highlighted accomplishments. And I'll take the best accomplishments from the work experience and put it there because that kind of proves the summary. But also, boom, it's right there for the recruiter to see. It's bullet points, so it's easy for them to read. And then I'll typically have 3 columns of skills and competencies. But the point is, that first half of the first page of the resume they get enough information that they could decide right then and there whether to call you or not, or whether they want to keep reading or not. So make sure you don't bury the lead. Don't put your good stuff down below because they may never get to it. If they read up top and they're not engaged or you haven't gotten their attention enough or their interest, they're not going to keep reading. 3/4 of resumes because of bad email addresses. I was thinking about it. It's an old joke, but it's still my joke. When I had to get rid of my Ken Stud at AOL.com email address. It was a sad day for me, but my career skyrocketed after that. Coincidence? I think not. Um, don't put a picture on your resume. For a while, I was starting to see more people do that. Now they're not. I mean, they're going to see your picture on LinkedIn anyway, but the photo on your resume could mess up the applicant tracking system, which is that automated software that screens resumes. And three-quarters of resumes are going to be discarded because they're screened out during the applicant tracking process. Now, the way to overcome that is by having keywords in there, making sure that you're really that your resume is somewhat customized for that job. I don't think you have to rewrite the whole resume, but I think you should go through it. And if you took my approach to a resume, that top half should probably be edited. And that way you have a better chance of being picked up. But the applicant tracking system really then also, by the way, just an FYI, serves as a database for recruiters. You might not get that job, but you're now in their database. So having those keywords will be helpful then too when they're searching for applicants for other jobs because they're going to use keywords to find applicants in their database, and you want to be one of those people. There are different kinds of resumes. Chronological, you just kind of go through your jobs from most recent back. Functional is where you don't list your jobs necessarily individually, but you pick aspects or experiences you had from each role and you kind of put them all together so people can see, you tell your story that way. It's focused maybe on a particular role or a particular industry. And then the combination obviously is a combination. Now, for me, the functional, I'm not a big fan of it because it always feels like you're trying to hide something. Are you trying to hide your age? Are you trying to hide that you've moved from job to job often? I'd like to get it all out on the table. And the combination is the one I described earlier. Summary, highlighted accomplishments, skills, and then your work experience from your most recent job back after that. This one is really more for those mid to late career people. Again, the difference between an objective and a summary. An objective is I'm looking for a job where I can develop my skills to blah, blah, blah. It's about you. Nobody cares, no offense, what you want. You want to go with a summary. The summary is more, it's telling about your career, like I said, a little bit back, mostly forward, what I could bring forward. It's about what you could do for them. And that's one thing you need to keep in mind throughout the entire recruiting process and interviewing process is it's not about you. It's about what you can do for them. And you really got to keep that in mind in everything you're talking about. I mentioned having keywords in your resume. It's important. You got to grab their attention, hold their interest, and you need to tell a story. I talked to you earlier about that art of hello, your branding statement. That branding statement should be a common thread through all of your marketing materials, through all your conversations that you have. And you need to tell a story of growth and continued growth and being open and flexible for even more growth. Now, again, thinking about the world we live in now, post-COVID, AI influenced, you really need to make sure you're emphasizing the results. First, the results. Results, it's all about results. Hiring managers want to know, what can you do for me? Can you save me time? Can you save me money? Can you help me build my team? What they're looking for, you need to be able to address. But then again, throughout your resume, make sure they know that you're technologically savvy to some extent, that you take initiative, that you are adaptable and you embrace change. Change happens, it's happening every day, for God's sakes, at this point. So you really want to make sure that that's coming through your story on your resume. Now, the biggest thing that I see, and I would bet John and Charlie probably and any other career coach who might be on today sees, is that when I get a resume, more often than not, it's a list of responsibilities. It's a responsibility statement telling me led a team of 10 salespeople for the Eastern region. It's oversaw the manufacturing of the lead product for my company. Things that tell me what you did, but they don't tell me how well you did that. I mean, a lot of times I could take the resumes that I get, and when they're so heavily responsibilities statements, that I could put my name on top of it because it doesn't say whether I did it well or did it at all. But it's the bullet points that really will differentiate you from everybody else because they're yours. They're accomplishment statements. That's where you really need to focus on results. You need to be able to describe a situation, the actions you took, and the results you delivered in two sentences, maybe 3 or 4 lines at the most on your resume. And those statements need to talk about the outcomes you delivered, the value you added, um, the way you maybe changed a process. I know that you can't always have data. In sales, it's easier because you have a quota, you make it or you don't make it. A lot of jobs you don't have data, but you still can talk about how maybe you improved a process, how you helped build a team, how you got kudos from management, or you saw these customer satisfaction ratings improve. There are different ways you can do it, and you've got to sometimes finesse it, but people want to know, what are the results? How did you change the job you came into? How did you deliver in that role? Because when I see that, I could then think about how you might deliver for me as a hiring manager. So I'll take a quick break here. John, any questions at this point?
Yeah, we have several. So first is, well, someone just commented that the resume piece can be a challenge with AI parsing the resume with keywords. Um,
Mhm.
and then, Lori asked about tailoring your resume to different jobs, that she needs to tailor to specific position, which leads to several resume versions. Uh,
Mhm.
um, yeah, see, Jean asked, are you suggesting that a key accomplishment section in a resume is not needed since the top three accomplishments are included in the summary?
Okay. Good questions, and thank you for that. That last question is good because as I'm communicating to you, I think I'm saying one thing, and if you're hearing something different, it's good to know that. So let me try to tackle all those, John. First of all, regarding artificial intelligence, yeah, it's out there, and really you should use it to your advantage in looking for a job, and that might mean helping, using it to help you find keywords, might be helping you word or reword things on your resume. I still think, though, you need to have that human touch because A, it's somewhat obvious sometimes that something was AI written. And B, you want to make sure you want to try to connect. I think it's hard to connect through a computer program as opposed to you putting yourself into it. But I do think AI can help you as long as you don't let it take over what you want to do. In terms of the question about tailoring your resume, I mentioned when I first started that I like to think I'm a practical coach, and I would say if I were looking for a job now and I had to rewrite my resume every time I applied for a different job, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. It's just not me. And then I would be more upset with myself, and then I would be, start beating myself up, and it just add to the negativism that often comes with a job search. But that's why I like that top half of the resume that I told you about, because I can do that. I can edit that up top. I might switch out some of the accomplishment, there one or two of those accomplishment statements with other ones that maybe are more appropriate for that job. But if I do that on the top half, I think that's enough to get you to make it customized, so to speak. And then in terms of those three accomplishment statements, no, I still think you should have a full resume with your work experience, responsibility statement, and then bullet points below that. But I'm just because you just showing three might not be enough. The person reading it might then say, "Oh boy, this is interesting. It's pretty good. Let me see what else they've done," and then they'll go down and see the rest of your resume. And it's really, like I say, those top three accomplishments, I'm for the most part copying and pasting them up top. Sometimes I'll edit them down and make them a little shorter, a little more with a little more punch and maybe a little less detail up top, but a focus on the results. But you should definitely have a full work experience filled out as well.
So if I could paraphrase, I think what you're saying is, as opposed to completely different resume versions, you tinker a little bit with the opening, when it's appropriate for a particular job you're applying to. But you don't, if you're stuck in the mode of I've got 3 or 4 completely different resumes, I think that suggests you've got a problem with your search target to begin with.
Hmm. That's a great point, John. Yeah. And some people do have a master resume, and it might be like a 3 or 4 page resume that then they pick which parts of that they're going to want to include in the one they um, uh, submit. But to John's point, I think you do have to ask yourself, boy, if I have so many different ways I can go, is that helpful for me, or would you be better off being more focused? And I would submit you'd be better off being more focused.
We have another question from Gene. What's your approach for resume writing for those that have careers in several industries?
What would be my approach? Well, what the approach would be going back to taking inventory for yourself is to find out, is there a common thread there? Are there transferable skills that come through in each role that you had? And then can you bundle that in a way that you describe it in your summary, and that your work experience and the different accomplishments that you highlight or bring out would be again would focus on using those skills for whatever career direction you're going. Um, I don't know, John, let me ask you, did I cover that one, or do you want to try another shot at that?
I think that's a good shot.
Okay.
And then Tracy asked, you talked about a brand statement. Would you put the brand statement on the resume?
Well, first of all, and I'm going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn momentarily. It would definitely be in there on in the about section. I'll talk to that. The branding statement, that could be the first line, or at least a variation of the first line of your summary as well. I mentioned don't bury the lead. There's an acronym, bottom line up front. And so you want to get your brand out there fast. You want it, and it's got to be interesting enough that they're gonna that it's gonna have an impact that they'll keep reading. So I would say a version of your brand needs to come through early and powerfully in your summary. And then again, it should be a common thread through everything else that you do.
Right. And then one other, and then probably should move on. Is there a minimum number of bullets for each prior job? How far back should someone dig in their experience to customize a resume for a potential role?
Okay, great question. There's no rule or law about how much, yeah. But you got to remember this too. The purpose of the resume is to get an interview. I don't know of anybody who's ever submitted a resume and gotten a call. I just read your resume. Oh my God. I'd like to offer you a job for $150,000. It's not going to happen. So you don't want to put everything you can in there. You need to put enough in there that they want to learn more about you. So white space is your friend on your resume. Typically, I think it makes sense. The most recent job, if you could have 3 to 5 good bullet points, probably makes sense. The next job after that, you might have 3 or 4, then maybe 2 or 3 as you keep going further back in your career. Um, the rule of thumb is you go 10 to 15 years, more or less, 3 jobs, more or less. That's how far you go back. However, let's say you had a sales role early in your career, and then you went into marketing for a number of years, and now you're going for a sales role again. Well, even if that sales role took place 15 years ago or more, if it's relevant to the role you're interviewing for, then you really should have that on your resume. If not, then you might either have it just listed as a job and the time frame on there, or you might not have it on there at all. But it's a little bit circumstantial in terms of how far back you go and what information you use. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about understanding, and a couple things to understand with the understanding part of the trust success model. And that's, first of all, just understand the market you're going into. Recognize that there's a lot of competition. It's a really difficult job market. I think you ask any career coach, it's not easy out there. So if you go out there thinking I'm going to get a job next week, that you might be disappointed. So you need to know your market. How hard is it to land a role in this market, with this industry or this company? Get a realistic sense of how long it takes. Because if you have the wrong expectation and you expect to get a job next week and you don't, it, excuse me, plays on that negative mindset that you can't have looking for a job. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be optimistic. You shouldn't, I believe in positive thinking and manifesting your future. You need to be that way, but be realistic about your expectations. A lot of jobs are still, if not hybrid, fully remote. So you need to present yourself in a way that makes you a good candidate for that kind of role. And I think, when I talk about building trust with hiring managers, I mean, hiring managers are stressed out like the rest of us. If you could somehow connect with them, if you could, rather than just being interrogated in an interview, have a conversation with them, ask them about their experience, make some kind of connection that you found on LinkedIn or doing your research. When you can connect with somebody, that's going to build a better relationship, and it can help you start to build trust with them as well. You also need to understand the environment. First of all, when you're interviewing, if you're interviewing remotely, you need to be aware of what's around you. People in your house need to be, or apartment need to be aware that you're going in an interview, because you need to present yourself in a professional way. Because I'm hiring you, I need to know if a client, if a coworker, if somebody contacts you, you're going to be able to be professional with them and get things done with them. You also, if you're out of work now, I would strongly suggest if there are any training or certificates you can get. I'm not saying you have to spend a lot of money, but if you can, there are a lot of free programs out there, right? I think especially AI, it's funny because it is out there everywhere, but I guess I kind of feel like I'm not sure what it means, but still, if you could talk AI and sound like you know what you're talking about, that's what they need to know. They need to know you're current, you're up to date, and you could use AI at least to some extent. And you also want to be able to talk about your work ethic. When I'm not with you in an office, I need to know you're working. I don't need you working 24 hours a day, but I want to know I can get you when I need you and you're getting done the work you need to get done. The other part of the understanding portion of the trust success model is about social media. And in particular, I'm talking about LinkedIn. And there are different aspects of LinkedIn. You need to have a great profile. You need to make yourself attractive to others. And I don't mean just good looking, because that wouldn't work for me. I am what I am. But I mean, you literally need to attract recruiters and hiring managers to you. And there are ways to do that with your profile, and there are ways to do it by the engagement level you have on LinkedIn. And you want to build your network. It's important to have at least 500 connections on LinkedIn. For whatever reason, that's the LinkedIn search algorithm that recruiters use. 500 connections will elevate you in their search. Other things that would elevate you, having as full a profile as you possibly can, and also being engaged on a platform, commenting on things. I'll talk to that in a minute. Um, but the reality is that LinkedIn is not a spectator sport, and you do have to be engaged. Um, Similar to a resume, as I talked about earlier, you want to have keywords that are in there. You want to use proper terminology. And just like with Google, if you Google something and you get 12 pages, chances are you're not going to go past that first page of entries. Maybe you'll go to the second. But if anything third page and on, is unlikely that you're going to even see it. So how do you get to the first page? You use keywords, you comment on things, you post things, you're very active on LinkedIn. That'll elevate you in the search algorithm. Now, with LinkedIn, everything counts, and it starts with your headshot. That very well may be the first impression people get of you. So you want it to be a professional picture. You want it to be a view from the chest up, smiling, looking at the camera, looking like an approachable person, someone that has some kind of personality. The serial killer look, it's over. People don't do that anymore. That went out in the 20s and 30s, I think. But also, I see a lot of pictures where there's somebody with clearly somebody has their arm around them. Maybe they were cut out of the picture. They're in a tuxedo. They're at a wedding or some kind of event. And to me, it's a little bit lazy. It shows a lack of professionalism. And I think you could put a little effort in, even just using an iPhone or a smartphone to get a decent headshot. So take the time to do that. The headline is what comes right below your picture. The way I think is most impactful to do that is you want to have um, actual job titles of the jobs that you're interested in there. Because if I'm a recruiter and I'm looking for a product manager, I'm going to put product manager in the LinkedIn search bar. It just makes sense, right? So you need to have that in your headline. What I typically do is I'll have the different titles. I'll put the title, a space, a vertical line, space. And then after a few titles, I like to put in a very short sentence similar to your branding statement about who you are and what you do. So for me, I might have career coach, executive coach, keynote speaker, author. I help people improve their professional lives. I just want people to know what I do. When they come to you, or something more, you could even have something better than that. I'm sure there are other things you could do, but as a project manager, I help, I deliver projects on time and under budget. Something so people know why they should talk to you or why they should continue reading. The next part of and I'm not going to go through every one of these, by the way. So I don't want you to think I'm going to bore you to death with this one, but the About section is a very important part of your LinkedIn profile. It's your opportunity to market yourself. Now, if you look at somebody's profile who has a decent full About section, you'll notice that only the first 4 lines show. And so that makes it even more important to be compelling, to be an attention grabber, so that the person who's reading it will say, you know what, I have to hit that see more button. I need to read more about this person because I like what I've read so far. And the way I do that typically, and it's not a lot different than the resume summary and highlighted accomplishments, is I'll talk about what the person does, what they deliver. I'll say examples of my work include dot, dot, dot. Now, if the first part is compelling enough, they're going to say, yeah, I want to see they do what they just told me they could do. They hit the see more button and they get maybe a couple of highlighted accomplishments. Then I would have the next paragraph talk about what it's like to work with me. People say they enjoy working with me because I'm a problem solver. I'm able to look at situations, analyze them, and come up with solutions to make things work better. Maybe another sentence or so about what it's like to work with you. The last paragraph, for me personally, I think could be a little bit personal. When I'm not working, I'm training to run marathons, or when I'm not working, I enjoy taking hikes with my family and my dog into the mountains. Something that just kind of paints a fuller picture of who you are. Certainly, if you could relate it to your job, I like when I'm not as as a controller, when I'm not working, I spend time volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, keeping their books or, taking care of their financial statements. Something that could relate back to the job. If you're an avid athlete, if you're training for marathons, to me, that means something. You're dedicated, you're focused, you're persistent, you don't give up. So make it rounding out yourself, but then if you can connect it to a job benefit, that's helpful. And then the last thing, separate from the paragraphs, is one last line. I would say if you'd like to talk to me about how I can help you improve your year-end financial closings, reach out to me at ken@surecoaching.com. Make it easy for them to get in touch with you. And then the last thing here I'm going to touch on about LinkedIn is recommendations. I think it's a great way for you to get other people to tell your story. You might go to different people throughout your career and ask one person to write something about your leadership skills. Somebody else could write about your problem solving. Somebody else can talk about your collaboration. And really have other people tell your story. The best way to do that, by the way, I hate to say this, you could certainly ask someone to write your recommendation, and they may or may not do it, and they may or may not write what you want them to write. Or, and this is what I do, and it's really uncomfortable, I got to tell you, but I think it's the best way. I'll write to someone who I'm pretty sure is going to give me a recommendation. I say, assuming you would give me one, I know how busy you are. So I wanted to make it as easy as possible for you. So I wrote a couple lines down below. Feel free to edit it, put it in your own voice, and when it's final, I'll send you an official LinkedIn request, and all you have to do is copy and paste it in. And more often than not, people say, you know, Ken, what you wrote is great. Send me the request, and I'll put it in LinkedIn. The reason why I like that is because I can control the message. I can tell my story through other people in the exact way that I want to tell it. So it's, for those of us who have some level of humility, it's not easy to write about how great you are, but in the end, it really will pay off for you. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions around understanding.
Sure. Well, one thing that you didn't mention that you mentioned in the book, which I think is a really important point, is the activity on LinkedIn. And
Mm.
particularly, I think something that people forget to do is, hey, I've got this interview lined up. And you should be getting the list of who you're going to interview with. If you're not, you should be pushing for that. Well, now you can go out and look for what have they posted? What things are they interested in? Like in addition to just figuring out, looking at their background. If I do a search on their postings, things they've written, things they've commented on, that's going to give me a lot of insight into them and their attitudes and things I might be able to use in the course of the interview.
Hmm. Yeah. And actually, John, I left that out because I wanted to make sure you did read my books to see if you'd bring that
Okay.
up. So, so it was a test.
We did have a question that was not exactly related to the last section that I passed over, which was, given that networking is the best way to find the next opportunity, in your experience, what tools are essential to networking most effectively? And I think you've hit LinkedIn. That is one of the key tools. Any others that you'd throw into the list?
Um, well, I think maybe it's not necessarily tools, but how you go about networking. And I will talk a little bit about that in teams. But I think it's really having a more targeted, focused approach to networking. And then you use LinkedIn to find the people that either are in your network or that you can bring into your network that'll help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. But no other tools come to mind for me in the professional realm. John, anything from you?
Well, there used to be one, but they shut it down recently. That it was a really good tool for keeping track of your networking activity. But I'll tend to give my clients a spreadsheet they can adapt for that purpose to,
Mhm.
because I think it's very important to track what's going on and when am I going to make my next follow-up? What came out of this? What referrals came from this person? So I remember to link it back when I have the meetings to be able to tell, hey, Ken, thanks so much for connecting me to Lori. That was a great connection and I got some really good ideas from it. So if you're really organized in keeping track of those things in whatever tool you use, that can be
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. And John, you also mentioned something that I didn't emphasize, I don't think enough, and that is being engaged on LinkedIn. You could have the greatest profile in the world, but for you to be found, you need to put yourself out there. And so, a lot of people say, I don't write, I can't write a post, and that's okay. So don't write a post, but you can comment on other people's
Mhm.
posts. You can repost other people's posts and put a comment on it and making it a significant comment, not just, hey, here's a great post. Instead, here's a great post. And what I really like about it is when they wrote about blah, 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 I too found that to be effective in this particular situation. But just showing that you know what you're talking about, that you're not just reposting, but you're also demonstrating a knowledge of the subject matter.
Right.
So,
That's how you start to get seen as a subject matter expert.
yep.
Charlie has a question.
Yes. Hi, Charlie.
Ken, great presentation. Great. You got a
Thanks.
lot of wisdom to share with everybody, Ken. Building on what you were just saying, Ken, when you identify a person in an organization that you want to meet, check out if they write stuff on LinkedIn. When they write stuff, comment on it. After a while, they'll see that you're stalking them and they'll be curious, who is this person? The minute they look at your profile, and you send them a LinkedIn connection, then you're going to ask them for a conversation to do that. People like to talk to people that admire what they're doing. So
Mhm.
use LinkedIn that way to get in touch with people who otherwise you may not be able to get in touch with.
That's a great point because yeah, and Charlie, to that point, I'd connect with someone and they'd accept my invitation, and I'd say, now that we're first connections, let's jump on a call and learn more about each other. And it'd be crickets. Nobody would respond. And I'd get really angry about that, thinking, we're first connections. Why did you accept my connection if you don't want to talk? And then somebody straightened me out and said, listen, Ken, they don't know you. They think you're probably going to try to sell them something, or, they just don't have time for someone they don't know. And that makes sense to me. But Charlie's suggestion of following someone, commenting on their stuff, it makes it from a cold call to at least a warm call where they've seen you. And especially if they comment on your comment or they respond to you, then you have something. Then it's easier to say, hey, we've been going back and forth on LinkedIn, or I've been following you and I love what you post. Any chance we can get on the phone for 15 minutes? I'd love to learn more about what you do. You have a much better chance of doing that. And that's a great way to build your network.
So there are no other questions at the moment. So
Okay.
move forward.
So with simplicity, I'm going to focus on really interviewing and start with the fact that we humans have a pretty pathetic attention span. It's about 8 seconds. Some of you may have seen that goldfish have a longer attention span than us. I do question that. I just would love to see that study. Like, what do? They put a television show on, and when the goldfish swims away, they lost their attention. Is that how they measure it? I don't know, but still, 8 seconds is low. It's down from 12 seconds, I think, pre-pandemic. And it's just because we have so much stuff coming at us, we don't have to waste time. We could keep clicking through till we find something we want to keep reading, which is another reason that you don't bury the lead. Bottom line up front, because they may not get to it if you haven't grabbed their attention immediately. Now, if you think about the fact that we speak at an average of 150 words a minute or 2.5 words a second, that means you have about 20 words to grab someone's attention. And that's why that art of hello is so important. But also, as you're developing your interview answers, make sure that you come out swinging with each answer. Make sure when you introduce yourself, you give them something good to think about. Tell me about yourself, that the first part of that answer is very impactful. Every answer you give should be, if they don't hear anything else, something that impacts them in a positive way. Now, when you're getting ready for an interview, I look at what I call the 3 Ps. You got to prepare. You have to first start by knowing yourself. It goes back to the inventory, right? Know the results you've delivered. If I were to ask you right now, that second page of your resume, that third bullet point on the second job, tell me about that, would you? Could you do that? And if you can't, you need to be able to. And do your research. Like John said, if you get the names of the people, check them out on LinkedIn, Google them, go to the company page. If it's a public company and they have an annual report, go there, do a news search, find out all you can about the company. It really can make a difference in your interview. And I always say to people, like, I like a lot of the subtle things to do in an interview that convey a powerful message. So if you say, when I was doing my research, I found that just by saying I did my research tells me you prepare, you don't shoot from the hip, you really look to understand things before you move forward. So take the time to do your research. I am a big believer in process. I'm going to talk to you about stars in a minute, and I did say stars with an S. I'll tell you why. But I think that I know that interviewing can be stressful. And some of us, when we get stressed out, have a tendency of rambling. And I know for me personally, I had an experience in an interview years ago, and I started feeling really good about myself. And I started digressing for my answer and digressing until I was so far gone, I didn't even know what I was talking about. And I had to ask the interviewer, I'm sorry, what was the question again? That is not a place you want to be in an interview. It says I'm a bad listener. It says I couldn't communicate clearly and concisely. Not good. I did not get that job, but I did learn a lesson, and that's important. But the process also, it gives you a beginning, a middle, and an end. It helps you to tell a story, and stories are the way you want to go in your interviews. Stories are memorable. Stories are compelling. We all love a good story. We've been hearing great stories since we were little kids. So if you could tell a good story that connects with the interviewer, you're really onto something there. And then the last thing is you've got to practice. Practice out loud. If you don't practice out loud, then you get in that interview and you're trying to figure out what to say. And oftentimes that great answer that's in your head doesn't come out of your mouth very well. So practice using a video, do like athletes do, right? They videotape themselves and then they critique themselves. Practice in front of a mirror, find a coach or a mentor who could give you fair, good, honest feedback. Because then once you get into that interview, it's relatively easy. I've been there, I've done that. I've got all the answers. Just bring it on. Give me a question. I'm ready to go. And that is really Sun Tzu. He's a 5th century Chinese militarist. He talks about preparing. First prepare, then go to war, as opposed to those warriors who go out there and try to figure out how to win. Think about the athletes maybe you've seen laying on the floor in the locker room. They got headphones on, their eyes closed. They're playing the game in their head before they get out on the field or the court, so that when they get out there, it's not unfamiliar. They know how to handle things. Take the time to prepare, use a process, and practice out loud. And if you're doing a video interview, think about all the things that you need to demonstrate that you're comfortable with video. You're making eye contact with the camera and not the screen. You're positive, you're energetic. It shouldn't change just because you're on a video. I know people say, oh, it's different, it's hard, I can't connect. You just try to pretend that you're talking to a real person right in front of you and just be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. It's too hard. It's hard enough being myself. I can't be someone else. So you should try to be yourself too. And then be confident, but not cocky. You want to let people know, yeah, I'm the right person for this role. Now, I mentioned to you the process, and I know a lot of you are familiar with STAR. I do STARS because I really believe that regardless whether you use a process, this process, or another process, what's really important is that you connect your answer to the job you're interviewing for. So you might describe a situation where, we recently had won a contract, but part of the contract meant that we had to deliver the project in 90 days. That's the situation. So the task was, I needed to put together a plan, bring together the right people, get everybody aligned, and get to work right away so we could hit that deadline. So the actions I took was I went to the different department heads. We identified who would not only be able to deliver for the project, but maybe help develop them. I set up the calendar, got everybody to commit to getting this done. And the results were not only did we finish it in 90 days, we actually finished it in 85 days, and I was able to do it below budget. So that's the story. But the reason why that's important for you for this role is because I know in this role, that's one of the benefits that you give to your clients is delivering projects on time and under budget. And I think this is an example of why I would be a great person for that job. And so it ties everything together. It's a story. I've talked about what I did, not what we did. I've got the results to show you and tell you about, and I'm telling you why it's important. Don't leave it to chance that they're going to interpret your answer in the way you want them to. Tell them why you told them that answer. You may think, oh, it's obvious why I told them that. Well, maybe it's obvious to you, but it might not be obvious to them. I always say that what's obvious to a Republican is not obvious to a Democrat. So don't expect that anything is obvious. The word obvious is a terrible word. Once you have all your STARS answers, and you should have a STAR story for each of those bullet points on your resume, and some of them might be the same STAR story. That's okay. You do need to be able to, in the interview, then adapt your answers so that you can get into it cleanly. So you might have a couple answers that you put under a competency of decision making. Look at the competencies for that job, take your STARS answers and put them under each one. I got a couple for decision making, I got 2 for leadership, I got 1 for analytical skills, and some of them, again, might be the same. But that way, when you're in the interview, you're not thinking, oh, what am I going to answer? What am I going to answer? What are they asking me? You say, oh, I know. They want to know about my decision making. I got a STARS. I can tell them for that. So it helps, especially if they ask you some of those wacky questions like, how much would you charge to wash every window in Philadelphia? Well, do they really want to know how much you charge, or are they wondering how you would analyze that situation or problem solve? So that's what you need to, this I think helps make it a little easier to know what to answer, how to answer a question. So I'm going to just go through teams and then I'll ask for some final questions and I have a couple slides and then we're done. But for teams, you really need to get out there and be with people. Isolation is the enemy of the unemployed. We all have that voice in our head, which more often than not for a lot of us is negative. And I think the more you're alone, the more you're in your office, even if you're working on LinkedIn or your resume all day, the louder that negative voice can get. So get out of your office, get to networking events, have one-on-one networking conversations, meet people, don't help other people. Do the things that'll feed you and help you remain positive, help you remain open to potential opportunity. As was mentioned earlier, networking, it's going to help you get a leg up. I mean, I'm not sure if it's mentioned here, or did a client mention it earlier that, you could get a stack of 100 resumes for a job almost instantly when you post that job. But if somebody walks in and says, I got this resume of this person, you really should check them out. I've worked with them. I've seen their work. I know they're reliable. You want to check them out. Well, that resume is going to the top of the pile. So that's why talking to people, getting out there, it might not help you right then and there with that conversation. It probably won't even be that person that helps you land the job, but they'll introduce you to someone. They'll call you and say, "Hey, I just heard about this job opening at this company or in my company. You ought to check it out." Or maybe you see a job in their company and say, "Hey, I saw this job opening. Remember we just spoke a couple of weeks ago. Would you mind getting my resume in front of the hiring manager?" So that's another reason why you want to get out of your office and talk to as many people as you can. And then you also need your family, your friends, your loved ones. That's your other network. Those people that'll pick you up when things are not going well, but will be there to celebrate with you when they are going well. Now, yes, this is my family. I've been told that maybe I should sell this picture for a toothpaste commercial. I think there are a lot of teeth in this commercial, but in this picture. So I think there may be an opportunity for me there. And with that, let me see if there are any final questions. Thank you, Janet. At least one person smiled, hopefully, from that. I appreciate it. Any other questions that I can address?
There are no new ones in the chat box. So if anyone has a question, bring yourself off mute and just ask it directly. And I'll just make a couple of observations. One, I think one message that came through for me really clearly in what you were saying in a lot of places is something that I like to tell people all the time. Leave them wanting to know more. That more button on LinkedIn in the about section, get me excited to click on it. Your resume, get your opening to where I say, I want to read more about this person, or I want to invite Ken in to talk to me. In your, don't bury the lead in what you do. You always think about how can I leave people wanting to know more.
Mm-hmm.
So Gene asks, what is your opinion on cold calls or marketing strategy?
Cold calls are tough. I hate them personally when I get them. More often than not, I try to be polite. I give them one no thank you, and if they get back to me again, I either ignore them or maybe get a little more firm with them. I think your best bet is, as Charlie mentioned earlier, is to try to build a relationship online if they are active on LinkedIn. Or maybe you have someone, a former colleague or a college alumni or somebody who's connected to you who might introduce you to that person. I mean, when all else fails, cold calling may be the way. And if you do, you need to give them a compelling reason to want to talk to you. I think cold calling's tough. I think it's maybe the last resort, but sometimes you got to do it.
Switch so you can see more of the people here.
Okay.
By the way, there've been a lot of interesting comments in the chat. So, and I would encourage everyone, if you don't realize what to do, when you go to the chat, you open the chat box. Up at the top, there are 3 dots. Click on the 3 dots and click Save Chat. And that will save everything in the chat that in a folder on your computer. So I would encourage everyone to do that.
Great.
We do have a new question there. Any suggestions on how to reach out to headhunters on LinkedIn or email?
Yeah, that's a tough one too. And then I know Charlie wants to comment also, but I would say, headhunters, executive recruiters, the reality is they get paid when they place people. So if you have the skills and experience that they think might fit a role they're searching for, they'll be your best friend. They'll respond to you, they'll reach out to you, they'll help you hopefully land that job. But as soon as you're not an option, they're going to move on. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean that they're mean people. It just means they get paid when they place people. And it's a very time intensive job being a recruiter. So, I showed you that 75 to 80% of roles are landed through networking, 10 to 15% are landed through recruiters, and about 5% through just posting randomly online. So you can get a job in each of those ways. You just want to spend a majority of your time networking and then going with the recruiters and then just randomly posting online. Not sure if I gave you enough on that one, but let's see what Charlie, did you want to say something?
I wanted to build on this idea of cold calls. And it's not really a cold call. Let me share a story. I had a client, he was a CTO kind of a guy, and we had 5 specific companies he wanted to approach. He did research on all 5 companies, and what he was looking for is a problem that he could solve for that particular company. He found a problem in one of the companies that had to do with the way the company dealt with their data center or something like that. I forget the specifics. But we went right after the CEO, and it was snail mail. Folks, snail mail is more effective than email. I'll repeat it again. Snail mail works. So he sent him a snail mail. And it basically said, your competitor has a serious problem with how they're managing their data in the cloud, something to that effect. You can utilize that weakness to your advantage. I'd love to chat with you about it. Call you on Tuesday. Now, nobody wants to take a phone call from a job seeker. I'm sorry, folks. Nobody wants to talk to a job seeker unless they have a need. Yet, this gentleman found a need that this guy did not know he had. So he simply sent him a letter pointing out a problem. And most leaders do not want to suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out. They need to be informed. He basically said, I have information I want to share with you about your competitor. He got the appointment. He got the phone call taken by the person, the CEO he sent it to. You have to be bold, folks. You can't be a wimp. You have to be bold. You have to take chances. The worst thing that will happen is what is already happening to you. Nothing. So you have to be bold. You have nothing to lose. You could be the greatest thing a company has ever spoken to. Give them a chance to say no or ghost you, and then you move on. That's one less company that you have to worry about. So I'm pretty passionate about this, because you're the one that has to make everything happen. You can't wait for other people to make it happen for you. If you want to work in a specific company, find a way. And John and Ken and myself have all kinds of ideas that could be helpful to you, how to get outside your comfort zone, do things that appear to be weird, but things that work. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you, Charlie. Great points. I love that approach, what you just talked about, that identify the problem. And
before we run out of time, Ken, did you want to tell people how they could order your book?
Yes, I will. So let me move on here. to know that as difficult as it can be, you're on your way. As long as you keep moving forward, you'll find an opportunity. I believe in my trust success model, and it can help you regardless of where you are in your job search. Uh, John, did you put that in there? Somebody snuck that in there on me, but I do want to say that I do have a book. It's available on Amazon. I'd love for you to purchase it. And also, if you would like to talk about your situation, I'm very happy to talk to you. No pressure, no sales. Just be happy to meet you, connect with you, and if I can help you in any way, that would be great. So that's it for me, John.
And I'll be sure to include Ken's contact information in the the email I'll be sending later today with a brief evaluation of the session. Love to get your feedback so we can make sure that we're hitting the mark on all of our programs. And you will be getting a link to the recording of this program when it's available, probably roughly a week from now. And Dan had raised his hand, and I cut him off there to let you do your finish. Dan, did you still have a question you wanted to raise?
No, I just wanted to add, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to say that what Charlie mentioned about being bold, so true. And I just wanted to share an experience. I mean, trying to get a job with a hedge fund for the ideal position that my prior jobs had. And, you know, I wrote a letter and I just sent it to the HR department to the company in New York City. A week later, I got a personal email from an HR person that was very nice, but now I have a contact in HR when this job opens up again or something. So, I tried the snail mail, and you're right, Ken, it does work. And then also be bold, I mean, in my current role in sales, I had an address. I went knocking on doors. I left my card with a note in their mailbox. Boom. I got a couple phone calls that resulted in, good commissions. So, get out of the, I don't know. I like to, I don't know, go out of the box, so to speak, and just, you know what? You have nothing to lose. They're already saying no, but you don't know that yet. Say it to my face. Do a personal introduction. It works. It gets something out of it,
And Dan, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. And I would say, because sometimes looking for a job, there's a bit of a paradox. Like if you think about your resume, on one hand, you want to stand out from the crowd, but on the other hand, you got to make it easy for them to read and see what you're doing. So it's the content that'll make you stand out. Similarly, in interviews, you can't be a lunatic in the interview, but you got to find a way to stand out. Is it by leaving something behind? Is it by telling great stories? You've got to differentiate yourself. And I think Charlie and Dan had great examples. Thank you.
So Tracy, how was it? Do you find that this will also apply across the pond?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It was really practical. Someone actually said that in the comments. Really practical and a really good way to kind of get a reality check of how things really are, and also what we can do more of. And I think one of the key takeaways that I've just had is just get out there, be courageous and go for it. Even when sometimes maybe you're doubting yourself, do that even more, get out there even more, because something will happen. And I think leaning on each other and leaning on others is really, really important. It teaches you a lot. And I think also as well, I see this and think, how can I help others that are going through the same or will go through something like this in months or years to come? Because it does happen to a lot of people.
Yes.
John, may
Go ahead, Charlie.
one more thing. Over 62% of people that have jobs hate them and they want to go somewhere else. Think about that. So when you do what Dan did, you don't know if somebody inside the company is thinking of getting rid of the person that's in the job you want. You don't know that, but there's a great chance that when people don't like what they're doing, their behavior, their performance drops, they become vulnerable, and they don't have to post an ad. They don't have to go on LinkedIn. If you're in their top of mind, they'll call you. Be bold.
Yeah, so sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to say after Tracy spoke, I spoke to her once and now she's part of this community, you know, talking about these things. I got connected with her because of my manager who she used to work with. So another example of, look, it only takes one conversation to open up a lot more opportunities.
Mhm. Great point.